Thanks for your patience. A little delayed today, but for good reason. So I have a couple of items at the top. As you know, tonight the President will deliver his first primetime address to the American people at 8 p.m. Today marks the one-year anniversary of the shutdown due to COVID-19, and the President will speak directly to the American people about the sacrifices made, from the more than 500,000 lives lost to the millions of people who have lost their jobs, and the even millions more who have been impacted by the pandemic. He'll provide an update on the work of his team to address the greatest operational challenge the country has faced and the work his team has done to rapidly increase the number of vaccinators, and vaccination sites. And he will lay out the next steps he will take to get the pandemic under control. Even while he is focused on getting the American Rescue Plan across the finish line, he has been reviewing drafts of the speech. Last week he was, and of course through the course of this week, and making line edits. He's been providing line edits in order to ensure that he is striking the right tone and providing the right level of clarity as he prepares to address the country this evening. He plans to provide a clear outline of his approach, level with the American people about what is required of them, but also provide a sense of hope of what is possible. I wanted to provide a little bit more on upcoming travel. Of all of our principles, as we prepare to go out and engage with the American people about what is in the rescue plan. As you know, next week the President, the Vice President, the First Lady, and the Second Gentleman will be traveling across the country to kick off the Help Is Here tour and amplify the American Rescue Plan. On Monday, the First Lady will travel to Burlington, New Jersey. The Vice President and Second Gentleman will travel to Las Vegas, Nevada. On Tuesday, the President will travel to Delaware County, Pennsylvania, as you already are aware. The Vice President and Second Gentleman will travel to Denver, Colorado. On Wednesday, the Second Gentleman will travel to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And on Friday, the President and the Vice President will travel to Atlanta, Georgia. During their trips, they will discuss the benefits of the American Rescue Plan for working families, and they will engage with people at each of these stops about how the American people can benefit from the components of the package moving forward. So they will talk about the $1,400 checks that 158.5 million American households can expect, and many who will start receiving them soon. He will talk about the historic expansion of the child tax credit. He will talk about they will all talk about extending unemployment insurance for around 11 million Americans, the tens of billions of dollars in rental and homeowners assistance that is a part of this package, the expansion of the earned income tax credit, which will go to 17 million workers, and the components of the package that significantly reduce health insurance premiums for millions of American families, and of course the fact that the bill will lift 11 million people out of poverty and cut child poverty in half. They're eager to get out there on the road. And I have one more exciting implementation update for all of you. Since the Department of Treasury and the IRS are working hard to get relief payments out the door as fast as possible to the American people, people can expect to start seeing direct deposits hit their bank accounts as early as this weekend. This is, of course, just the first wave. But some people in the country will start seeing those direct deposits in their bank accounts this weekend, and payments to eligible Americans will continue throughout the course of the next several weeks. So with that, Jonathan, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you, Jen. Tomorrow, the Chief of Staff tweeted that there'll still be a celebration in terms of this bill signing. Congressional leaders would be attending. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us who will be there, and if any Republicans, who none of them voted for this bill, would be invited?
So the celebration tomorrow will be a bicameral, event, but it will not be bipartisan. It will include leadership, and we are still finalizing the list of attendees, but we hope to get that to you as soon as it's finalized.
Can you walk us through, as part of the Help Is Here tour, decisions behind the locations for the travel next week, in particular the President's two stops? Why Pennsylvania and why Georgia?
Well, this is just the beginning of the president and the first ladies and the vice presidents and the second gentleman's travel, and they will of course do some travel in addition to next week. But it was important to the president to visit not just blue states, but also red states, purple states. You will see that reflected as we continue to announce travel and trips that he will take in the coming weeks. Obviously, these are two places where he of course talked about the importance of delivering on the promise of getting every American the $2,000 checks when he campaigned in Georgia in December. So that's a place where that message really resonated, of course, with the people of the state and where it was amplified to the public. But, you know, it's a place also close to his heart. But this is just the beginning of the travel. I wouldn't overread into it other than he is looking forward to having the senior members, the principals from the administration out across the country, fanning out across the country, which is exactly what they're doing.
And one more on a different topic. The trial of Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin has begun in connection to the death of George Floyd. Has the president been briefed on the developments so far? And he condemned the death, certainly when it happened. Does he believe the police officer should be convicted of murder?
Well, the president obviously doesn't weigh into. He's not going to weigh into an ongoing judicial or a legal case. He's watching it closely, as are many members of the administration. As you know, he himself encouraged the House to pass the bill and he is very pleased that it did. And policing reform, in broadly speaking, is an issue that he believes is urgent and one that he is committed to working with leaders in Congress and also taking steps as he can take on his own to address. But you know, he has spoken about he spoke about the trial and, of course, the death of George Floyd in personal terms, and that is a reflection of how he continues to feel as he watches the events unfold with the trial. It affected him personally. It redoubled his commitment to advancing racial justice. That's why he signed an executive order on racial equity on his 6th day. One of the reasons why he signed an executive order on racial equity on his 6th day in office. And of course, he will be watching it closely, as many people in the country will be. Go ahead, Jeff.
Jen, a follow-up on some of the vaccine news from yesterday. The president said that one reason he wanted to have another 100 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in the cupboards, as it were, is to be prepared. If everyone is vaccinated by the end of May, or at least able to be, what are you preparing for? What might happen that the U.S. would need an additional 100 million shots for?
Well, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but the reason why, one of the reasons why we ordered the additional 100 million doses is because we don't yet know what vaccine is most effective with children. That testing is still happening with the FDA as we speak. As you noted, he wants to be over-prepared and oversupplied. We're still looking at the impact of variants. This order of doses can also be used for booster shots, which is something that's also under review by the FDA. So he's just preparing to ensure we are ready for every contingency here in the United States. Of course, we want to be a part of the effort around the world to vaccinate people around the world in a range of countries. That's why we've provided $2 billion to COVAX with another $2 billion committed. We are the largest funder of global health in the world, and we've invested over $150 billion in global health activities since 2000. We've re-engaged on day one with the World Health Organization, and we're continuing to engage. He is personally, and many levels of our administration are engaged personally with their counterparts about addressing this pandemic globally. But his first priority and focus is on ensuring that the American people are vaccinated. And once we are at that point, we will have a discussion about what's next.
My understanding is the president directed this to happen yesterday, but the deal is not with J&J isn't yet in place. When do you expect the deal to be made?
As soon I can get you an update, I can check with our team and see if there's what the final details are, but we certainly anticipate and expect the deal to fully move forward.
Just one other vaccine question related to a story that my colleagues did from Europe. Has the U.S. told the European Union not to expect deliveries of COVID-19 vaccines from AstraZeneca that are made in this country?
Well, I would say first, we have conveyed privately what we've conveyed publicly, which is that our focus is on ensuring the American people are vaccinated. And of course, any company can work with any country around the world on the purchase of vaccine supply. And certainly that wouldn't be something the US government would be directly engaged with. But in terms of the supply we have purchased, our first focus, our primary focus is on vaccinating the American people. That's what we've conveyed publicly and privately as well.
You said that a lot, but have there been any specific indications or conversations with the EU saying, don't expect this to come from our country at least until the rest of this population is vaccinated?
We have said publicly exactly what I've conveyed, which is what I'm conveying is we convey the same thing privately. Of course, any country can purchase vaccines from these manufacturers directly. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mexico's president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, says that people coming into the U.S. right now see President Biden, as the migrant president. Does the White House take that as a compliment?
The migrant, give me a little more context.
Well, he said they see him as the migrant president, and so many feel they're going to reach the United States. We need to work together to regulate the flow because this business can't be tackled from one day to the next.
Well, first, Mexico is an important partner in ensuring we're addressing the flow of migrants from Central America through Mexico and many to the border of the United States. We have conveyed privately and publicly as well that the majority of people who come to our border will be turned away. We certainly also recognize that because the president and our administration has made a decision that the way to humanely approach immigration is to allow for unaccompanied minors to come and be treated with humanity and be in safe place while we're trying to get them into homes and sponsored homes, that some more may have come to our border, and there have been, of course, a large flow of children across the border. We recognize that, but we made a policy decision because we felt it was the humane approach. But the facts are, the vast majority of people who come to our border are turned away, and the statistics bear that out.
Okay, and then in terms of keeping COVID out of the country, does the White House think that it's a problem that travelers have to show a negative COVID test, proof of a negative COVID test when they fly into the U.S. from any foreign country, but travelers don't need to show anything like that when they just walk across the border as long as they don't go to a port of entry?
Well, I think there's been a lot of confusion about what's been happening at the border as it relates to people who are coming across and what happens when they come across. And I know Governor Abbott down in Texas has expressed some of his concerns, and many of those have not been based in fact. So let me go through a few of those because I know we're all interested in facts around here. One, Governor Abbott has referred to what's happening at the border as open borders, as us having an open borders policy. That is absolutely incorrect. The border is not open. The vast majority of individuals apprehended or encountered at the border continue to be denied entry and are returned under Title 42, as we've already mentioned. Also, he has suggested that we are not vaccinating CBP officers. Again, we like to deal with facts around here. There's no higher priority than the health and safety of our federal workforce, and the Department of Homeland Security and CBP has been clear that currently more than 64,000 frontline DHS employees, including members of U.S. Border Patrol, have received a vaccination. So that's another point just to provide full clarity. The other piece is the question about the testing of migrants at the border, or testing of migrants as they are coming across. And we have DHS and FEMA have stepped in and worked with local mayors, NGOs, and public health officials in Texas to implement a system to provide COVID-19 testing and, as needed, isolation and quarantine for families released from Border Patrol facilities. Their proposal and agreement would cover 100% of the expense of the testing, isolation, and quarantine. But Governor Abbott has decided to reject that. So there's a lot of confusion about these issues, and I just wanted to provide a little point of clarity here.
But not asking about Governor Abbott, asking about President Biden in charge of the federal government. Why are the feds relying on NGOs to administer these tests? We've talked to people down at the border who say, that migrants are only tested if they show symptoms, that seems like a loophole.
That's not an accurate depiction. There's an important role that NGOs, that local mayors, that local officials play in working together. And this is a proposal that was worked with DHS, with FEMA, and others to help address and ensure that people are tested. And Governor Abbott, I raised that simply because he had raised a concern about that, and I wanted to be clear that we've put forward a proposal. So I think the question is, why is he standing in the way of local communities getting the funding and support they need to help with testing, isolation, and quarantining efforts?
But again, just a question about Biden administration policy. COVID is COVID. COVID at the Dulles Airport Customs is the same as COVID in a border town. So I'm curious why it is that it's enforced for people flying in from other countries, but it is not a requirement by the federal government to test or to prove a negative test anywhere along the border except at the port of entrance.
Well, again, I can just describe to you what our policies are. If there's more to convey to you, I am happy to do that.
And then just one quick one on green jobs. You guys have talked a lot about tackling the climate crisis while creating good-paying jobs. Now the president of the Texas AFL-CIO has come out to say someone working in a refinery leaving to go install solar panels, they're probably going to take a 75% cut in pay. Is that something the administration is aware of?
I'm not sure which jobs are being compared there. Here's what I can convey to you. The president is committed during his presidency to invest in, work with labor unions, with climate activists, with with the industry to invest in good paying, clean energy jobs. And he believes that unions have an incredibly important role to play in ensuring that those are high paying jobs, that those treat the people who are in them with the respect and value that they deserve through collective bargaining rights and a range of the benefits of union organizing, being a part of a union. Obviously, that requires additional work and investment by the federal government working with Congress to invest in what we see as industries of the future. Oil and gas jobs are not going away. There are many industries that are, of course, continuing to function. The outgoing administration flooded the oil markets with cheap federal leases. This will not affect oil and gas production or jobs for years to come. But what our objective is to invest in what we see as the industries of the future, where we feel is where the jobs are going to be moving forward. And the president looks forward to continuing delivering on his commitment to doing exactly that.
High paying, good paying, but equal paying?
High paying, good paying jobs. I think we're comparing a little bit of, I'm not sure what specific jobs you're comparing. What I'm conveying is the commitment to ensuring that jobs in the clean energy industry will be high paying union jobs. That's what the president's objective and commitment is to. Go ahead, Caitlin.
The White House has said that President Biden wants to look ahead to a return to normal in his speech tonight, but how does he do that while also striking the balance that 1,500 Americans on average are still dying from coronavirus every single day?
You're absolutely right, Caitlin, that his objective is to strike exactly that balance. And this is one of the reasons that he has been line editing this speech for the last week plus to ensure that he is conveying, that he is leveling with the American people, that he is delivering on his commitment to being truthful about the challenges that we continue to face, what is going to be required of the American public to get to a return to normalcy, as you conveyed. But he also wants to provide a sense of hope and what's possible if we abide by the guidelines, if when you have access to a vaccine, you get the vaccine, what people can look forward to. And so that is exactly the balance that he is hoping to strike tonight.
So should we expect concrete steps and policy changes in this speech tonight?
I think you can expect, this is his first opportunity, prime time, of course, to really speak directly to the public. We all have a conversation about a lot of these issues every single day. Most millions of Americans out there are living their lives, some of them, dealing with their kids in school, getting their jobs done, etc. And this will be an opportunity for many people to really tune in and hear from him on his plan on what his team has done to date, what steps they've taken, an update since he took office, but also concrete steps he wants to take moving forward. There will be some news in the speech, but it is really about laying out clearly for the American public what steps he's taken, what his team will do, and what is expected of them as well.
And since he's just signed this bill, has he decided who is going to oversee the implementation of it? And then on the ceremony tomorrow, you have some Republican senators who did not vote for this bill now touting parts of it. What is President Biden's response to those Republicans like Senator Wicker?
Well, we invite them to work with us on the agenda moving forward, because clearly the bill that the president just signed into law is something that the American people are excited about, that people will benefit from as soon as this weekend, as we conveyed. And we are hopeful that as the president talks about his Build Back Better agenda, has more meetings with members of Congress, we'll have more people on board from both sides of the aisle.
And regarding who's overseeing?
We are, as I mentioned yesterday, the president absolutely is committed to having a person who is running point on it. I don't have any personnel announcements today.
Question on the border. The administration has refused to call it a crisis, instead referring to it as a challenge and saying what you call it doesn't make a difference of how you're responding to it. But now today there are over 3,700 children, unaccompanied migrant children, in Border Patrol custody. They're spending on average over 100 hours, 4 days, in these facilities that are jail-like facilities not meant for children. So how can you say that's not a crisis?
Well, I think what Ambassador Jacobson and Secretary Mayorkas were conveying, and what I've conveyed, is it doesn't matter what you call it. It is an enormous challenge. It is something that is front and center for the president. I noted yesterday, he had what is a regular meeting, but he had a briefing yesterday on the trip to the border. And there are a number of, while there are no final policy decisions, there are a variety of actions under consideration, including identifying and assessing other licensed facilities that can help add safe capacity for these children, relaunching, as we talked about over the last couple of days, the Central American Minors Program, accelerating the unification of children with vetted families, family and sponsors, steps like embedding HHS and ORR in the earlier parts of the process. So, the president is very focused and very in the weeds on the operational details here, and on taking and pushing his team to take every step that can be taken to address exactly what you noted, Caitlin, which is the fact that children should not, these Border Patrol facilities are not made for children, that we are focused on expediting the time they spend there, that these HHS shelters are not meant for permanent living, for anyone permanently living there, that we want to expedite the timeline between when kids cross the border and when they are getting to sponsor homes. So our focus here is on getting to the root of the issues, and taking actions, and we don't feel the need to.
But aren't those the steps that you would take if it was a crisis that you had on your hands?
These are the policies we're taking to address. We're in the midst of twin crises, from the pandemic to an economic downturn that is impacting tens of millions of people in this country. People are struggling to make ends meet. They are worried about whether their grandparents, their cousins, their friends are able to get a vaccine, and they are suffering because they're worried about the mental health of their kids who aren't back in school yet. And the president's focus is on addressing those crises. And I would send a question back to many of these Republicans as to why the deficit spending wasn't as concerning when they were giving tax cuts to the highest income, but now it's concerning when we're giving direct checks and relief to the American people.
When you look forward at the rest of the agenda that President Biden has laid out, how do you get even moderate Democrats on board with another big piece of legislation, for example, his climate plan that has a things he wanted to try to accomplish. Is he going to try to move forward on a piece of legislation where he thinks he can get bipartisan support? In other words, how is that going to factor into his decision-making process?
Well, the president would, of course, love to have bipartisan support, and there are areas of policymaking that he has talked about quite a bit, as you noted some of them on the campaign trail, including infrastructure. Modernizing our immigration system has actually historically been a bipartisan policy-making issue. He had a meeting on cancer and addressing cancer and tackling cancer, of course. There are a lot of issues that he feels there's opportunity to work together on, and the door to the Oval Office remains open to bipartisanship, to finding ways to certainly work together.
I could try one more time on the issue at the border and just follow up on the comments of the Mexican president, who said that the surge in unaccompanied migrants is because they see the president as the migrant president. What does that say about how the president is handling this situation?
Look, I think the president has been clear, as has every member of our administration. You had Ambassador Jacobson doing this the other day, that the border is not open. Now is not the time to come. We turn away the vast majority of people who come to the border. The vast majority. These numbers are put out by CBP and the Department of Homeland Security, and people can see those numbers. We stand by our decision and our policy as an administration not to send unaccompanied minors back on the treacherous journey. So,
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst. Republicans denounced President Biden's $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan as a left-wing Christmas tree of goodies. Remember this gem a couple of weeks ago from House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy?
It's too costly, too back to school, back to health. Unfortunately, this bill is too costly, too corrupt, and too liberal. Only 9% goes to COVID.
Dorsey, that's not the clip. Can you roll up the right clip? Hold for 1 second. Okay, let's try this again. Sorry, guys. So Republicans denounced President Biden's $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan as a left-wing Christmas tree of goodies. And there was this gem a few weeks ago from Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy.
Unfortunately, this bill is too costly, too corrupt, and too liberal. Only 9% goes to COVID. We watched the swamp come back to Washington. $100 million for a tunnel in Silicon Valley just outside of Speaker Pelosi's district. Or a bridge for Schumer. Or money for schools that 2/3 of it cannot be spent until 2023.
Okay.
This is the wrong path. And this is not what President Biden said he would do at the inaugural.
Okay, so I say we own this. I wouldn't exactly use their language, but I'd say that this is one of the most progressive pieces of economic legislation in our modern history. Seriously. And when I say we need to own this, Republicans attacks and all of those attacks that they're throwing at us. I mean, we as progressives should embrace, explain, and defend this legislation until the Republicans come crawling back, pleading with us to share in the credit. Some of them are already campaigning on it, despite the fact that they voted against it. They've tweeted out what's in the package. Make no mistake, voters will be handing out credit for this legislation the way this legislation hands out $1,400 checks. Not enough. Americans deserve those checks, and Democrats deserve the credit. So will be very important to be able to explain what's in this bill and to defend it from the slander of Kevin McCarthy and his cronies who don't want to spend money on schools and on broken bridges. The $1,400 checks are, of course, the best known part. There was a lot of debate about how many people would get these checks and exactly how big they should be. Where did we end up? You know how economists love to divide the population into fifths, quintiles. Just thinking about it gives me shudders of Thomas Piketty. But under this legislation, every single American in the bottom 3/5 of the economy gets a check. That is the middle and two lowest quintiles. Everyone is looked after. This is radically different from the way that government help has been distributed in the past. Breathtaking, really. Instead of looking after the rich in the belief that this will somehow magically trickle down and do things that help all of us, this legislation focuses on helping the poor and middle, simply and elegantly, and I might say even swiftly. In fact, one of the biggest challenges ahead is that poor people are eligible for these checks, but aren't always easy to find because data shows many don't fill out income tax returns. Really surprising, actually. And that is a problem. It's a good problem to have, to be able to not be able to, to have to be able to support poor people, but we have to fix these systems. I don't really recall anyone ever worrying about whether corporate tax breaks would find their way to corporations. But related, this bill also includes direct aid to children in low-income families. If we make this permanent, it will be a sea change in reducing poverty in America. And there is a lot else in this bill. For one, it is correct. One of the big mistakes after the 2009 stimulus crash was Obama adopted a stimulus plan. Too little. Everyone now recognizes that stimulus plan was way too small. But in addition, a hunk of the benefit of the federal spending that was approved was washed away by government cutbacks in states and cities. Janet Yellen, she's one of the people who called this out. This bill helps avoid that by sending $350 billion to states, localities, and tribal governments. This is, by the way, one of the largest aid programs to tribal governments in history. It's not reparations, but it is absolutely long overdue help. McCarthy is correct that direct spending on the pandemic is smaller than the spending to repair the economic carnage caused by the pandemic, and I'm good with that. But there's a lot of money in this bill to strengthen vaccinations, improve contact tracing, and make sure that we get the medical part behind us. There is also some $15 billion for something I'd like to see even more spent on in the future: proactive and preventative community health care. This will help prevent the next pandemic from killing people disproportionately by race, ethnicity, and income. That is an investment in a better future. And it's also, might I say, perhaps a little bit of a pathway into Medicare for all. And we need more of that. And after President Biden, which he just did, signs this American Rescue Plan, we are in the middle of Biden's first 100 days. So, as my friend Walker Bragman stated, the kids are still in cages. Might be a little bit more reformed, but they're still in cages. The $2,000, but now $1,400 checks, they still haven't gone out. No student debt has been canceled, none whatsoever. And U.S. is still partnered with Saudi Arabia as it wages genocidal war in Yemen. And the minimum wage, of course, is still federally $7.25 an hour. Not to mention, we haven't had big debates over Medicare for all, college for all, and the Green New Deal. We have a lot of work to do. All right, we have a great show today. Shauna Gallagher is here to talk about her pack to end all packs. And Arun Chaudhary and Rabb are here a little bit later to talk about today's news. See you in a few seconds. All right, we are in the midst of our book club for March. If you're not a member of the book club, you are missing out because we are reading Mackenzie Wark's book, Capital is Dead, Is This Something Worse? And it's freaking me out a little bit. And I need to be able to talk about this book with our community, and I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to release a podcast with her soon. But the book club, as you know, maybe you don't. I don't know. Maybe you're new to this. We started the book club in 2021, and we have 3 different programs. You receive a book in the mail. Either you choose 1 book a month, 2 books a month, or 4 books a month. And with that comes, it's been a process because of the mail service. I'm not going to lie, but we figured it out, I think. But the books come in the mail and we read with each other. People submit questions at the Nomiki Show at gmail.com. And then when the author is available, we interview them and we ask some of those questions. We talk about the book, some of the backstory of the book. So it's a really, I don't know, it's fun. It's definitely my challenge this year. I did this a few years ago. I think I mentioned to folks that a few years ago, I read 1 book a week for a year. It was, I think, more than a few years ago at this point. And I wanted to do it again. And it's been a challenge. I'll just say that. I can do 1 a month for sure, 2 a month for sure. 4 a month, so we try to diversify. We don't pick these like 700 page books and then like another like 350. We try to like mix it up with the size of the books throughout the month. But we have a great partnership with 2 publishers that you guys probably love and adore, Verso Books and Haymarket Books. They've been wonderful with us. They're distributing the books. It's their authors, so they're all left-leaning. We're trying to make it very holistic. We might even put in some fiction at some point. I gotta look at the list and see what we have. But we've got our books planned out for the next few months, and it's very exciting. So if you aren't already part of the book club, join us at patreon.com/the Nomiki Show. There's 3 levels there. It's all mixed up with the other patron levels. I can't control it. That's how it works. But you can go there and check it out. All right, we will be back with Shauna Gallagher.
It's deeply troubling, the specific allegation. The governor called an employee of his, someone who he had power over, called them to a private place, and then sexually assaulted her, is absolutely unacceptable. It is disgusting to me. And he can no longer serve as governor. It's as simple as that. It's deep.
All right. Well, a little bit of a change here. We're going to talk about Cuomo for a minute because there's a lot of developments happening. That was Mayor de Blasio of New York. No pal of Cuomo. They're like nemesis. They're just some backstory there if you're not aware of that. He's calling on Andrew Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, to resign based on the most recent allegation. And just breaking as of literally 5 minutes ago, the New York Times is reporting that the latest accuser, the seventh accuser, latest accusation against Cuomo is reported to Albany police. And I'm quoting the New York Times right now. Albany police department officials said on Thursday that they had been notified by the New York State Police and the governor's office about an alleged incident at the executive mansion involving Governor Cuomo and a female aide that may have risen to the level of crime, which I believe has to do with forced touching. It was Albany police officials said they heard from the state police on Wednesday night after the publication of an article in the Times Union of Albany that detailed accusations leveled by an unidentified aide to the governor who accused Mr. Cuomo of groping her at the governor's mansion where he lives last year. This is multidimensional. So I want to be as clear-headed as possible about this because there is real malfeasance with the nursing home scandal in the fact that they covered up what they deemed to be the accurate number of deaths, or the most accurate number of deaths that happened at nursing home and elder care facilities in New York State, possibly influenced by hospitals who were pushing because they wanted to remove the COVID patients and put them somewhere else because they were overbooked. But there was an actual cover up there. And that's, I think, which the crime isn't as bad as the cover up is because, you think back New York through COVID, the beginning, how these hospitals were overrun. They didn't have enough support and there was confusion and chaos. So, if the number of deaths had been reported accurately, it would have been an extraordinary tragedy. And Governor Cuomo would have had to deal with it. It wouldn't have looked good. But now it shows that he was perfectly conscious of it and more concerned with his political ratings or whatever else, or possibly some lobbyists that have supported him in the past. We don't know for sure. There's an investigation underway, 2 investigations underway. Actually, multiple. I mean, we now know that the feds are looking into it as well. But that has to do with a cover-up. Right? These are now 7 women who have come forward at a moment where, these are primarily, with exception to, I think, one person, primarily all people who've worked under Governor Cuomo in his office, in the administration. So it's not just that he has these allegations against him, and many of them are fairly recent. It's that these are all people who worked for him. And if you know anything about Cuomo's administration, big part of this is about loyalty. He has a circle around him. He uses fear tactics to keep people loyal to him. And as a result, he's been fairly protected. The Albany press isn't always the toughest on him. Neither is the New York City press, which has been extremely weakened. They report on the day-to-day, and big stories have happened where they have reported on them, like the corruption scandal involving the Buffalo Billion, which ended up leaving his closest aide in prison, and a large donor as well. So, but this is all part of the New York ecosystem. For folks who aren't aware, and I didn't really touch on this too much yesterday when we did our Cuomo story, in the last decade alone, you have seen the longtime Speaker of the Assembly, I believe he's sentenced at this point. I know he's been back and forth legally. Shelley Silver for corruption, for pay to play. The former Speaker of the Senate, Dean Scalos, the leader of the Senate, is now in jail. Malcolm Smith, former Senate leader, in jail, Democrat. Scalos is Republican. You have the previous comptroller, this was like a little bit over a decade ago, Alan Hevesy in jail. I mean, this is, and not to mention the governors that have cycled through, whether it's Spitzer having to step down, and then, I mean, it's just, it's been, and then there are plenty of other senators as well that have ended up in a lot of trouble, whether in jail or had to pay fines or had to step down. This is the culture of Albany. It's always been very protected, and you had these leaders there for a long time using fear, using power mechanisms to prevent deep analysis and reporting and accountability. And now I think because of that movement is paved a way for a progressive movement, which is demanded, which has challenged really bad actors like the IDC, that the Democrats who were caucusing with the Republicans in New York. That was devised by Andrew Cuomo. But they have the progressive movement that has challenged them and has gotten elected, has been able to put more pressure on Cuomo in a way that maybe if this had happened 6, 7, 8 years ago, when the other players were still in control, there would have been some sort of power deal. You know, we won't touch it if you don't touch our stuff. And that's politics. In fact, that's actually how Andrew Cuomo seems he's trying to get out of this. He's trying to basically use the budget, it seems, because they're in budget. This is budget time in Albany. He's trying to use the budget as leverage for them not to go after him or call for him to resign. But as of right now, I'm looking at the latest. I believe there's, how many people have now said that he should resign? I think we have a tweet by Kayla Lacey, who's a reporter at The Intercept who comes on our show regularly. There are 55 New York State legislators that have called on Governor Cuomo to resign. That includes the leaders of the Senate, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, and Carl Hastie, who's the Assembly speaker. So this is Dick Godfrey, who is a senator. He's the longest serving lawmaker in New York State. This is no joke. This is not just progressives. There are plenty of names on that list, if we scroll down, who campaigned with Governor Cuomo, who Andrew Gennardis was endorsed by Governor Cuomo, James Skoufis, slow down just a little bit, Rachel May, she's upstate. She challenged the IDC. John Liu challenged the IDC. Robert Jackson is progressive. Michael Genaris is the deputy leader of the state Senate. So there are quite a few progressives, but there are some people on this list that are Nili Razak, who, are more in the center, and some have been endorsed by Governor Cuomo in the past. And I mean, this is a big deal. This is a sea change. And so what's going to happen is, if he has to step down, we don't know if he will. I think my guess is that the political pressure is growing so much that you may see somebody like a Hillary Clinton speak up, and you may start with Kirsten Gillibrand, the senator, and then go to Hillary Clinton, and then possibly Senator Schumer, and then the last shoe to drop will be President Biden. If it gets to that circle, that's where I think Andrew Cuomo's budget game, which I didn't finish that, that strategy will not work. So what he's trying to do right now is use the power of the purse strings and say, we'll pass a billionaire's tax, which is something progressive movement has been pushing for, if you lay off me. But they're not laying off. More names are coming out. And maybe that's because they think Kathy Hochul, who is the lieutenant governor, might pass the billionaire's tax. I mean, this is also really complicated because if he does step down, he has to step down in the middle of a budget negotiation process. I don't know how that works. If he's impeached, which Carl Hastie in the Assembly has already said that they're putting together the plans for that, organizing what that would look like. I believe there's only been one impeachment in New York history of a governor. It's not looking good for Governor Cuomo right now. He is up against the wall, and there's a reason why you don't make a lot of enemies. Power only works so far, right? So it's hubris. I mean, there's just so much here, and just a little more backstory for folks to know. So he has been, who's in a relationship with Sandra Lee, who is the famous TV chef. I don't know if she's a chef. Her shows. So they broke up about a year ago, I believe, or maybe a little bit over a year ago, and they were not married. So this is all kind of happening like possibly post Sandra Lee, who knows what's going on in his head right now, but it's inappropriate behavior. If it does get physical, then this could be criminal. If it was indeed with this investigation, and what the woman has said. And the other thing that's interesting about this is that all of these staffers, from what I understand, is all of the staffers have come forward and said that they went through, like, essentially superiors. They complained. They went to HR. They moved forward on all of these allegations, went through the process that you're supposed to go through, and they were ignored. Even senior staffers, very well known, Karen Hinton, has said that she was treated inappropriately and nothing happened. There were no consequences. This is what happens when you have leaders that are not held accountable externally and internally, when you have toxic work environments, which is they're notorious for, when you use the politics of fear rather than the politics of compassion, understanding, coalitions, allyship. This is essentially a product of the old school New York political machine, a lot of the bad habits that really have not died out. And I'm going to be as bold to even say, we have it on the progressive side too. The political machine, there were a lot of bad things about, as we talked about on the show before, Tammany Hall used really bad tactics that carried on through and still to this day are still carried out in some ways if it's legal. But, they were there to help immigrants. They were there to fight the oligarchs of the time. They were a little bit rougher about it. It doesn't mean that the oligarchs weren't stealing money, weren't doing bad things too. It was just operated differently. And, as Arun Chaudhary, who's going to come on the show right now, has said, it's bad when Tammany Hall did it, but not bad when the oligarchs did it. But with that being said, when Tammany Hall fell apart eventually after second iteration in the 60s, a lot of these tactics remained. Shelley Silver, who was the assembly speaker, was kind of like came up towards the end of Tammany Hall, like his mentors were in Tammany Hall. And so that culture remained, that legacy remained in Albany. Of course, Andrew Cuomo was a product of his father's political machine. And even if they did operate differently. So, we have to be very conscious that even if these people go away, sometimes the infrastructure or the culture still exists. And it's wonderful that we're getting more progressives elected, but we also have to look at the institutions. There are a lot of institutions in New York that still operate in an old school fear mechanic. Like it's still dirty. It's still dirty. There's a lot of backroom dealing. There's a lot of horse trading. I mean, people have asked me to talk about the mayoral race and ranked choice voting. And I say, there are a lot of really amazing candidates in that race. I'm not sure all of them are even aware that they're being backed really to boost another candidate, because ranked choice voting is really complicated. We'll see how it plays out. A really complicated situation. It's the first ranked choice voting, a citywide election that New York has ever seen. And that happens at the end of June. So we're going to keep watching this. We are, there's a lot of interesting components to this that we haven't even touched on yet. And I don't think this would have happened if the IDC had not been defeated. So the IDC, again, were the 8 Democrats that were ousted in 2018. And if we did not have more progressives in the Senate, if we did not have Democratic leadership in the Senate willing to step up and speak out, meaning Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins and Deputy Leader Michael Gianaris, if we didn't have that groundswell of progressive senators, then the other senators wouldn't have come forward. And then that's how the political pressure is applied to people like Senator Gillibrand and Senator Schumer. That's how the political pressure is applied to people like Hillary Clinton, which, is still important. And Cuomo's very close. And of course, Joe Biden. All right. So we're going to talk more about this because it's not going away and it's a big story. It's huge. It's huge story. Huge story. Now, if he has to step down, it will be Kathy Hochul, the lieutenant governor, who's a former congresswoman from actually the district I grew up in, Buffalo. Our family's known her for years because that was, because it was Buffalo, Western New York. So that'll be interesting. We'll talk more about who Kathy Hochul is in upcoming episodes. We will be back with our amazing panel, Arun Chaudhary and Rep. Rabb. Welcome back, guys. This is that time where you gotta click like and subscribe and share on social media and tell everyone you know to subscribe, because I signed up for this deal to do a Twitch game when I hit certain metrics, and I'm ready. I've been training for the Twitch Olympics.
What game?
I don't know. Don't do that to me, Arun. You caught me.
If the kids are still playing Among Us, I do recommend it.
It is Among Us. I'm kidding. Among Us, and then there's another one that we're gonna do. Arun Chaudhary, of course, is a political filmmaker. He was the formerly. This is so hard to say. Formerly the first official White House videographer, and worked as creative director for a guy named Bernie Sanders in 2016. You know the jam. Are you in a closet?
This is my new office. You're going to be seeing more of this. And that's Gritty wearing a suit, actually. It's a puppet.
Gritty from Philadelphia, the sports thing?
Yes. We had in 2016 after Bernie, I don't know, we had done something with a website that the NHL asked us to take down. So we did.
Take down?
Yeah, because it was somehow, we were raising money for things on it with it.
Oh my gosh, they basically threatened to sue you. Great when sports leagues do that. We're not a sports show, guys. Anyway, sports teams, leagues,
sports show, folks. Yeah.
Sports entities. I don't know what that is. Is it a league? All right. Okay. Anywho, what I do like, the sport that I do like is interpreting cable news clips, and specifically when former congressmen who were Republican, kind of independent, decide to tell Democrats and progressives about their strategy. Let's roll that clip of Morning Joe, of course.
Totally.
I knew you'd like this one.
Whether it was for political reasons or not, the party is a lot more liberal than it was even under Barack Obama. A lot of things that Joe Biden talked about on the campaign trail, Barack Obama couldn't have touched. The politics are just different right now. The party's at a different place. And like you said, you're inheriting a pandemic. And listen, he knows, and he's known since when he started running, that if he won, and now that he has won, will be judged by two things. Can we get rid of the virus, and can we get people back to work? If he can do those two things, no one's going to care if he spent this much or that much, or even like what the social engineering that you might do underneath that. They want to know, do I have a job, and can I go to a restaurant? Can I go see my grandma? That's what people care about, and he knows that. And I think, if you go back to that package that he now thinks was too small under Barack Obama, back then a lot of people worried it was way too big. And I just think how people think about money and spending has changed. Republicans under Trump spent a ton. You look at what's happening in Europe. You look at the fact that there's just basically free money being pumped into the system by the Fed. People are just approaching economics different right now. And I think he's riding that wave. And the question is going to be, at the end of the year, are we here, or is it basically tempered? And are people working, and is the economy growing without massive inflation? If the answer is yes, he's going to have a lot of leverage and a lot of power. If the answer is no, it will be a very difficult presidency, and he knows that. And so he telegraphed very clearly a year ago exactly what he would do in the first 50 days, and he's done it. We always want to measure, is someone successful or not? Well, you might love the bill, you might hate the bill, but
oh, where are we going?
Now we'll see. And if he's on the
we're fast forwarding all the way. Okay. So, all right. So, anyways, this is I've been stewing on this for a while. That two things. Number one, are progressive moments made by the economy? Meaning, are we actually more progressive than we were 10 years ago or 15 years ago? And is that a reflection of just people being in more uncomfortable places in their lives, not having the support systems in place? That's number one. And number two, I think because he was able to spend $1.9 trillion, the neoliberals don't have an argument anymore. No? Is there a path forward for them to say, we can't afford it?
I mean, that was never really the issue. It was more, of an ideology, and almost sometimes it feels like more of a prove them wrong kind of attitude towards some of these bigger things. But I don't. Obama had a very classic economic crisis, right? Biggest economic crash since the Depression, blah, blah, blah. where taking sort of bold economic moves. I mean, I do think the pandemic is a little squishier. You know, there's fights about masks and its vaccines and its things. Both are obviously very bad for the economy, and both people needed to come back faster. I think the only difference is there is a progressive infrastructure putting pressure on Biden. And so, you know, as Senator Sanders says, if you don't ask for the whole loaf, you're just going to get crumbs. I think, you know, they asked for 3/4 of the loaf and got a couple slices, certainly not $15 an hour or anything, but this is a healthier, more robust bill than the recovery bill was in 2009. And I think that that's why. I mean, there's political cost.
But that progressive infrastructure, just to go back to the first point, which is, are we really, I mean, is it the circumstances that they've created because of austerity measures, because of Reaganism, because of neoliberalism, whatever, we can run through the list. Has that created the climate for a more progressive movement which has been built rebuilt, I should say, over the last decade? And so that you have that infrastructure in place. Like, were we as progressive in 2008 as we are now? Or did we just not were we just as progressive, but without the institutional support that we have now to get people elected and put more pressure on lawmakers?
We're in a different place. I mean, I keep sort of making it a story and less of a policy thing, so it doesn't work. But I think in 2008, we were still thinking that a failing system needed to be fixed. And I think a lot of folks in 2021 are thinking that there is a system that works perfectly well that needs wholesale changing.
Interesting. That's good. So where do we go from here?
Well, we should invite Rep. Rabb on to talk about.
Hold on 1 second. Keep going. Where do we go from there, Arun?
I mean, look, the next steps are, not to quote the neoliberal of all neoliberals, but not to let a crisis go to waste, is to make, I think, temporary measures to fix this pandemic permanent fixtures of American life. I think a little universal health care here, a little universal housing here. Hey, it's a pandemic. Hey, everybody needs a vaccine. Hey, shouldn't that be free? And we can kind of pressure test a lot of systems and make a lot of Americans who are otherwise nervous about these big projects be like, you know what? I think we should give this a chance.
Hey, Rep. Rabb. Rep. Rabb represents the 200th district of the Pennsylvania legislature. This is out of my mouth, not correct. So we're just talking about the $1.9 trillion stimulus plan that was just signed.
1.9 is also funny, right? It's
right,
it's sort of the 99-cent principle, but applied to trillions. And you're like,
well, you don't want to make it 2 trillion because that would just be crazy.
That'd be crazy to us.
God forbid we pump money into our economy in any way. God, I mean, you think all what I don't understand is, like, why didn't some smart Democrat say, like, let's round up all the billionaires who are for this plan and shove them on Fox Business and CNBC all day long to be like, guys, we need the growth. We don't have, if you people don't have money, they're not going to spend them on our goods, on our crap that we're shipping from China, like whatever. Like, they're not going to, I just never understood why that principle was never applied when clearly it exists. Rep. Okay, so let's talk about the $1.9 trillion stimulus plan. What does it mean to you?
Oh my goodness! Well, as a state lawmaker, it means that it's bringing home money to the states and major municipalities like Philadelphia, which is the only city of the first class. And that's not meaning we're first class folks. It means that that is a term in statute that means that we are the biggest, essentially, the highest population of any other municipality in our Commonwealth. So it could bring upwards of $7.2 billion to Pennsylvania alone. I believe $5 billion could go to school districts, could bypass the legislature and go to local educational agencies, school districts, which is huge because Pennsylvania suffers from education apartheid. We have the biggest disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And the haves, the biggest predictor of full funding or the most funding from the state to public school districts is whiteness.
And it's all based on taxpayer dollars in terms of property taxes. Is that why?
Well, no, the property taxes are on the local level. On the state level, they're using reference points from 30, 40 years ago to determine what adequate looks like. and that adequacy algorithm negatively impacts equity. So to make sure that everyone gets their fair share, because not all school districts are created equal. So my school district is the largest school district in the state. It has over 200,000 students here in Philadelphia, but you have a school district that has 10,000. Well, what if the folks are in, and we also have more students who don't speak English as a first language. We have more folks who are receiving special education. Those are more labor and capital intensive things to provide versus an affluent district with not a lot of students. So it's not about everyone getting the same amount. It's about an equitable distribution of state money. And based on generations of inaction and apathy, that tax is being weighed on Black and brown students and white people who send their kids to school districts where their kids are in the minority. So white people actually are disadvantaged too, along with white folks in rural areas where they're not getting their fair share. So this could be a game changer in many respects. And in terms of broadband, in terms of helping agriculture, public health, it's considerable. I just hope that my colleagues don't mess it up.
So how, when you say mess it up, is it because you're curious how it's going to be, the allocation is going to be overseen?
Yeah,
like that
so,
reminds me of the Obama stimulus.
I was gonna say, I remember Florida gave all their train money back.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not concerned about us not using the money, but the money that goes through the states, where the states can control within the limitations set by the feds on how it goes. So they could rob Peter to pay Paul. They could do all kinds of things that are the least intelligent and the least strategic in terms of moving forward. So what a lot of folks do, and I don't mean to be partisan, but it tends to be Republicans, they will find gimmicks, and not exclusively, of course, but they will find gimmicks to put to fix holes in the budget without actually addressing the systemic issues that create those holes in the first place. So I'm hoping that this is not something that validates that type of incompetence and recklessness.
Arun, on this topic, I mean, let's talk about the Obama stimulus plan. What mistakes were made then for folks who don't recall or aren't old enough to remember, or just drink too much wine, or drank too much wine at that time, I should say.
Well, look, obviously, people bent over backwards to try to get bipartisan support on things when it's just, we're in the age of McConnell then, we're in the age of McConnell now. That is what unites these two time frames. And so it's just not worth it. And so everything that you lose, you just lose, and you're just giving away. But I will say, and actually from a different perspective, and politics and governing are both, their games of scarcity. And if you could do everything, you would. But one thing that was begun, but then definitely the foot got taken off the gas pedal on, was the Recovery Act as its sort of own independent brand, kind of like the New Deal, and making sure that logo was really present and prevalent on projects as they were taking place all over the country, because not everybody was going to watch a White House, video we made of him landing in Cleveland and doing the thing. And so I think that more of that could have been employed. And I think, as we talked about on this show once, more artists also could have been employed, not only because they were hurting as much as anyone else was, but because then you'd have somebody to tell the story.
Right. Exactly. It works together. It's interesting.
And those stories have been told for generations, and the legacy of those artists. I have a great aunt who was an artist employed in the WPA in the New Deal, and her work still exists because that's the beauty of artists.
It's amazing,
right? You can't have a civilization, and one day maybe we'll be a civilization, but we can't have a civilization without art. And so Arun makes a really good point. These things stand the test of time. In my district, I have one of the largest park systems of any major city in Philadelphia. Fairmount Park is bigger than Central Park, and it goes like an amoeba all across the city. And there are structures where I hike that were built by regular folks during the New Deal. in the Great Depression. They still
Awesome.
stand.
We need a
It's the
better
last
name
time.
for it than green pork. Maybe green ham is good, but there needs to be in these bills more green ham, like, solar projects for sanitation, like, things that actually work that we know that just need some cash. Now is the time.
Exactly. So I want to pivot real quick because George Floyd, of course, we all recall, was murdered last year and launched the largest uprising in American history. Judge Cahill, who's overseeing this case against the police officer Derek Chauvin, he reinstates the third-degree murder charge against Derek Chauvin, the officer. And Judge Cahill has been noted as being very fair-minded. I was listening to a whole podcast about it yesterday. I mean, what needs to happen? I mean, I don't want to say what needs to happen. We just know we're in the situation where you literally had the most high-profile murder, and good, he's a fair judge, but there's got to be something just deeper, much deeper, symbolically deeper, where there's got to be more. I don't know. I mean, I'm almost at a loss of words about this, but I know we have to touch on it. So I'll go to Rep Rabb first.
So I think we have state laws, and those state laws put into effect criminal offenses. And in Pennsylvania, we have 1,500 new criminal offenses over the past 50 years. 1,500. So we are legislating our way into a carceral state that doesn't make any sense and doesn't keep us safer, and it impacts BIPOC communities and the poor disproportionately. Mm-hmm. So that's not the case with regard to police officers, because the percentage of police officers who are arrested, charged, tried, and convicted is ridiculously small. It's like watching a leprechaun ride a unicorn, right? That's how rare it is, right? But there's so many tools in the toolkit for prosecutors that normally are used to go after the folks who are disproportionately incarcerated, right? And targeted and profiled. And it's interesting that the time when this happens in Minnesota, in my state, a colleague, Representative Dan Miller, and I have just introduced a bill to amend the felony murder offense in Pennsylvania. So second-degree murder is if you are an accomplice. But in Pennsylvania, you could be accomplice if you didn't plan it, if you didn't touch the gun, if you didn't even know there was a gun, if you were not had nothing to do with it, but you were in the car. And I know men in cages for the rest of their lives because the sentence for second-degree murder in Pennsylvania is life without the chance of parole. It's the same as first degree. So you have a person who knowingly killed someone and someone who happened to be in the car or be around, who had no connection to it whatsoever. And we have to look at the tools that judges have in order to administer justice. And the reason that's important is the people who decide what those criminal offenses are on the state level are part-time elected officials in 46 states. And they represent small communities like New Hampshire. I think a state representative represents 14,000 people. In California, it's like 250,000 or 500,000. In mine, it's 63,000 people. What that means is the people who are watching need to know that these tiny little races that most people don't think about matter dramatically because they determine how the law is administered. They determine what the laws are and how it impacts the communities they care about most. And so these are conversations we need to have in between election cycles, and knowing how to hold our electeds accountable. And this is precisely it, because the tools that the judge have are given to him by the state legislature.
Not to mention the judges, many judges being elected are partisan judges. So, Arun.
I think this is a moment for Joe Biden to do like a really Joe Biden thing. This is sort of his bread and butter, right? Is like sort of talking these issues and to have some kind of national address and set a moral tone. And you do need that kind of backing, much like sort of an LBJ during civil rights, just somebody not even to say this is exactly how things should go down, but to be like, we have a moral problem and there needs to be a solution to this. And I mean, I think it has been a little disappointing to sort of not see the same amount of rhetoric happening now that there's not an election. Like we're hinting at, when there's not votes at stake is when people are watching what you do a little bit harder, and that's right now.
Yep.
50 days in.
I just to finish everything, because it's not comic relief. It's actually very dangerous. I want to talk about Tulsi Gabbard, and I know, Arun, you worked with her at one point. Can we just put up the Tulsi Gabbard cancel culture take? So there we go. Tulsi Gabbard says to the Daily Wire, you see, the final expression of cancel culture is Islamist terrorist groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda. Okay. In Islam, excuse me. What is going on here? I mean, she's on Dave Rubin. I really do want to ignore her. But I think she's symbolic of something more dangerous that's happening on the left, whether or not it occurs. It's significant enough. We have to pay attention to it, and we it's being facilitated by the right wing. So Arun, I mean, I know you know her and I know her too, and I am deeply disappointed in her pivot, but there were some obvious perspectives that she had previously that maybe we glazed over because she was part of the broader movement. But is this as dangerous as we might think it is, or no?
I think it is really dangerous, as dangerous as we might think it is. I also think that what's happening with Tulsi Gabbard is more a symptom of that than the problem with that. And that oftentimes you see people, again, we're talking about these big stories, narratives, and she's talking about a big narrative right now too, like the kind of way people get radicalized and how it all happens.
Yep.
But she also has a story to tell about her and her own career path. And I think as a lot of these doors have closed, and in the ways in which they do close in our turbulent modern times, can make people feel driven to do it. And I think a lot of radicalization, that this is where you see, like a woman in suburban Chicago having a meltdown on camera, sort of being more a potent symbol of this moment than somebody in an obvious place, like rural South, former Confederacy, having that same kind of episode. It isn't as meaningful. So I do think there is something about the way we see ourselves, and we're being driven into having never been wrong, and everything you've done up to this point has been right, and people just keep going farther and farther and finding acceptance to that. But it is dangerous because there is something that is awry kind of in the way that we talk about culture and in the way that we're dealing with it on the left. And it gives rise to a lot of people just sort of using definitions of words in crazy ways and conflating really nutso things. And I think that's what we saw in this quote, where we're seeing just a massive conflations of things to get you all the way from ISIS to a Jordan Peterson problem on a college campus.
No, it's exactly it. I mean, this is also a mechanism. It's a tool. It's a strategy ginned up by the right wing. I mean, Fox News for the last week has only been talking about Dr. Seuss. I had to go on and talk about Dr. Seuss. I would
totally
almost hit my head again. I was on with another Republican who literally said we should be talking about education. I was like,
that's my line.
We don't have the same. I was like, I'm happy to debate education, and he wants charter schools. I was like, great, let's talk about that instead. They're even losing their minds. They don't want to be part of it. But I mean, the truth is I think you're onto something, around people are feeling very, some people are feeling very insecure in where they are in life, how their beliefs are taken, and they go down these rabbit holes. I just don't know if she was canceled from the DNC. She stepped down from the DNC, from the non-important, unimportant vice chair position. I mean, where was she canceled? There are plenty of people who supported Bernie Sanders that have moved on and have beautiful careers. So I don't know if I think she always had a little bit of, there's something going on there. But Rabb, I mean, radicalization. I mean, when you have very significant, legitimate figures now echoing talking points from the rabid far right, there's danger to that.
Yeah, so, and you all have the benefit of knowing her. I don't know anything other than what I see online. And I find a lot of what she says deeply disturbing for some time. So my expectations of her have been pretty low based on how I've been introduced to her, remotely. But here's the thing I think that matters in a larger context. People who seek public office, elective office, there's a disproportionate percentage of us who are egomaniacs.
I was just gonna say sociopaths. There you go.
So that would include sociopaths. That would include deeply insecure people. That would include blindly ambitious people. And one of the reasons it took me into my mid-40s to even consider running for public office was because I didn't want to be associated with politicians because I have such a dim view of them, whether they're on the so-called left or the right, because the ones that I know about are ones who are like from birth trying to map their way to the White House. And yeah, there are clear examples of folks. And I have no interest in dealing with folks like that. Unfortunately, I have to because now I'm an elected official. But we have to look at that irrespective of ideology is the temperament and the personality and the personal values of folks who say, you know what, if I'm a Democrat, so I'm supposed to have access in these ways. And if I can't use these structures for my benefit, I'm going to, I'm going to go off and I'm going to say things that get me attention and access in other places, which makes you question why they were of a certain party or of a certain orientation anyway, when it really is just a springboard for opportunism. And I don't know enough about her to say that about her, but that is my impression.
It's actually similar to Kirsten Sinema too, in a sense. Which way do you want to sell out? Arun Chaudhary, Rep Rabb. I love Thursdays. Thanks for joining us on Thursdays. It's always fun.
Great to be here.
All right. We've got some shout outs. I have a comment from, I apologize, I don't have the name. There was a complaint that the media is not making a bigger deal about Fukushima's 10-year anniversary today. So yes, that is a huge deal. And I was listening to a podcast, I believe yesterday, about Fukushima and how they were interviewing folks, and turns out it's a complete ghost town now. Fukushima barely exists. Horrifying situation. And I recall when Fukushima happened, like months later, they were in California discovering just debris from Fukushima. It's horrifying. Anyways, I think that the media should be covering this more. And that's the problem, is we live in this 24-second news cycle, and we don't dig in deep. And that's, that's the economics of media. It's a business model of media. It's also what keeps us from solving the more existential, deeper issues. We're constantly, crisis to crisis. The Trump administration is a perfect example. But then alternatively, ratings are down everywhere right now in the media because Trump isn't keeping us on the edge of our seat with a crisis and another crisis. This is the time we have to do the deeper work, but that also means that we have to engage continuously, even when we don't have a Trump. All right, some shout outs here. We have Alan Kennedy saying Stephanie Kelton and other MMT economists, even to the left of her, those that value taxation even more, and great ones to listen to on spending. We love Stephanie. Friend of the show, friend of mine. She's amazing. Kowalski from Nebraska. I'm once again in the land time forgot central Kansas. Nothing against the people, but the Great Plains needs a second Homestead Act. Yes, we need people to run a functional society. And I want to give a shout out to our friend of the show, great union leader, Sarah Nelson. It is her birthday. Go on Twitter, wish Sarah Nelson a happy birthday. Tell her we sent you there. I'm just kidding. But just go wish her a happy birthday. She's one of our great leaders, and we're just so grateful to have her fighting for us out there. All right, Professor Hy K, we're also grateful to you. You're always in the chat, mixing it up. I think you went from YouTube to Twitch or Twitch to YouTube today. I'm impressed. That's a lot. Maybe when we hit 75K, Harvey K and I can play Among Us on Twitch. not on Twitter. That's not where we do that. I'm not that dumb, guys. All right. Other shout outs we have here. Harvey K also says at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, he will be on The Conversation on TYT with Ben Dixon talking about Amazon workers. That is today at 5:30 Eastern. Go check that out. That's pretty soon, actually. It's like in 20 minutes, isn't it? No, it's in an hour. All right, who else do we have here? Big thank you to MIDI-Docs and Mario for working those algorithms. And of course, our YouTube moderators, Bob C., Choke and the Orb, and Chuck Diesel. And as always, on Twitch, Dorian Sapiens, A Difficult Truth, Nightbot, Our Means, and Nug Wrangler. Thank you for keeping the chat rooms troll-free. Send us your addresses. I'm not getting them. The Nomiki Show at gmail.com. I'm going to send out a bunch of swag. I want to send it to you. Thank you. All right, we'll see you tomorrow for Femme Friday. We got a good one tomorrow. That is 3 p.m. Eastern on Twitch and YouTube. And to our patrons, thanks for always checking us out. I know a few of you have been messaging me about how you listen to our show in your morning walk. I think that's pretty cool. All right, thank you, everybody. Stay in solidarity.